Hey guys, welcome back to Within the Cauldron Lessons Told. I'm Nicho, and this is Thunder, and we are talking about the descent of the goddess today, as we've just passed Logostad and Lammas, and I hope everybody had a fantastic celebration. But let's get into it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we're going to talk about the descent of the goddess. Uh, this is very important for people to understand because as the goddess descends through, so shall we. We all go to the underworld after death. I think, with the autumn coming up on us and it ain't that far away, you know, we we should talk about this topic. And it's been a while for me, so it's a
Mhm.
welcoming subject
Mhm.
to be
Good
talking about.
refresher.
Yeah, definitely a refresher. But anyway, I want to read this to everybody. I don't have it memorized. I don't memorize stuff because I hate that. But, because I feel that spirit and faith, and knowing, you know, is the epitome of a witch. Is very important for us to be aware of it, but doesn't necessarily mean that we have to memorize it. But anyway, the the descent of the goddess. In ancient times, our Lord, the Horned One, was, as he still is, the controller, the comforter, but men know him as the dread Lord of Shadows, lonely, stern, and just. But Our Lady, the goddess, grieved deeply for the fate of her creations as they aged and died. She would solve all mysteries, even the mystery of death, and so journeyed to the underworld. The guardian of the portholes challenged her. The guardians of the portals, everybody knows them as the ancient ones, or the mighty ones. The guardian of the portholes challenged her. Strip off thy garments, lay aside thy jewels, for not may you bring with you into our land. It is written that your true self is the only fitting adornment for those in the realms of death. So she laid down her garments and her jewels and was bound, as all living must who seek to enter the realms of death. The mighty one, such as her beauty that death himself knelt and laid his sword and crown at her feet and kissed her, saying, Blessed be thy feet that have brought thee in thy ways. Abide with me, but let me place my cold hand upon thy heart. And she replied, Why do you cause all things that I love and take delight to fade and die? Lady, replied Death, it is the age and fate against which I am helpless. Age causes all things to wither, but when men die at the end of time, I give them rest, peace, and strength, so that they may return. But you, you are lovely. Return not, abide with me. And she replied, Nay, I love thee not, and I am needed in the world of the living. Again Death knelt and kissed her knees, saying, Blessed be thy knees that kneel before the altar. Abide with me. Let me place my cold hand on thy heart. And she replied, Nay, I love thee not. I am needed in the world of the living. Death, still kneeling, kissed her on the womb, saying, Blessed be thy organs of generation, without which none of us would be. Abide with me. Let me place my cold hand upon thy heart. And she replied, Nay, though I feel the beginnings of love for thee, I must return to those I fully love in. the world of creation. Death stood and kissed her on the breast, saying, "Blessed be thy breast, formed in beauty and strength. Abide with me. Let my let me place my cold hand upon thy heart." And she replied, "Nay, though I feel love for thee, I must not abandon those I am responsible for in the world of creation. I cannot do this thing. Better you would return with me." "Lady," replied Death, "it cannot be so. If I were to leave my realm and abandon those who seek their comfort and rest with me, then the wheel would no longer turn. Age and weakness would overtake those whom you love, and they who would have nowhere to find rest and peace and reunion with those who have gone before. As age and debility overtook your creations, there would quickly be no room for the new, only the withered, the tired, and the stagnant." He then kissed her lips, saying, "Blessed be thy lips, which shall utter the holy names. Abide with me. Let me place my cold hand upon thy heart." And she replied, "Let us both lay our hands each unto the heart of the other, thereby claiming and uniting each other unto the other. In this way may I rule in the kingdom of birth, creation, and life, yet share with you the kingdom of death, rejuvenation, and rest. United in perfect love and perfect trust, the universe may be whole and the wheel turn smoothly." Death replied, "This is indeed wisdom, so mote it be." They embraced, thus pledging their eternal love, and he taught her all his mysteries and gave her the necklace, which is the circle of rebirth, and she taught him her mystery of the sacred cup, which is the cauldron of rebirth. Blessed be. Well, anyway, this is what I'm going to ask you, Nico. If
Yep.
you have an answer, that's great. If not, when you hear this story, who are the gods or goddesses that come to your mind?
I kind of go through all of them. But I'm also somebody that has a deep love of folklore, so it runs me back to the myths of like Inanna, Persephone, or Korra, Hecate's descent, um, and like all of the stories that have this like witch mother figure and their descent into the dark part of the year.
Yeah. Well, for me, it is okay. If you would really look at well, for me, if I look at it, um, it's Persephone and Hades.
Mm,
Okay. But it is Demeter and Hecate too, because Persephone plays a vital role in farming and stuff like that. You know, she is the green. She
mhm,
brings in the green to the world in the spring. But the reason why she brings in the green during the spring is because Hades kidnapped her and took her
mm,
to the underworld. Demeter was looking for her when she was kidnapped, but didn't know that she was kidnapped.
mm,
But then she found out through another source, and Hecate got wind of it and helped Demeter go through the underworld to find Persephone
mm,
and struck a bargain with her. Well, I should say with Hades.
mm,
They struck a bargain with Hades that Persephone should return every year which is during Samhain.
Hmm.
So we have this recycling of Persephone going into the underworld.
Yep.
But another topic that I want to talk about is that we talked about the gates.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that when the goddess went through those seven gates,
She had sacrifice.
yeah, and a lot of witches would like to, argue that fact that the goddess didn't sacrifice, and she very much did. She gave. Okay, if we let me start here. Relinquish demand. Okay, one of the ancient ones asked for the goddess to give payment. And the seven gates are symbolic of seven planes, the ultimate divine, spiritual, mental, astral, elemental, and physical. And she relinquished all these things going through each gate. And okay, she must give part of herself to let go in order to see the truth for herself. These items, which represent the bare soul of consciousness, to be fully open without influences that we receive in life. The first gate, she relinquished her scepter. What could this be a symbol of? Well, the scepter is personal power, the influence of outward we have on things around us. That is why a lot of us go into our rituals. When we go into our rituals, a lot of times we relinquish. Like for me, I relinquish certain items of power during certain times of years, and I hand that power over to the high priestess, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Okay, the scepter is a personal power. When losing that, we isolate ourselves and we look at the universe upon out your own existence only. The second gate, her crown. The crown is a symbol of her authority. We have authority in our lives, whether it be children, friends, relative, or work. This is what our peers give us status to enact it. Is it? It is our worthiness, in other words, to separate us from work, families, and so on. It is to leave us totally alone. This is what others influence and allow us to be. The third gate is her necklace. This is a personal value, what we have achieved and accomplished. This is where society calls us for what we are due to. Wealth. Wealth is a sign of personal power, and society allows us to be influenced to do it. When stripped away, our self image no longer has a shield against self examination. The fourth gate, her ring. What could this be a symbol of? It is where we stand in society with organizations, clubs, orders, religious association. It also stands for relationships as marriage or engagement. All these are connections, and without these, we are left without any association, definition, or connection within others in society itself. The fifth gate is her girdle. What could this be a symbol of? This is a symbol of false appearance we have given others. When taken away, we then recognize our own imperfections in and outward, and our inward appearances lets others do the same for what we are really are. The sixth gate, her sandals. What could this be a symbol of? This has to do with our actual path we walk on and the politics we hold closely without deviation and faith.
Mhm.
What we embrace as our ideas to give your sandals up would be to ask you to let all of your personal views no longer exist, no politics, no self direction, or any personal agenda. Once you are stripped of this, you can only walk with spirit because you are no longer engaged within the physical presence or the existence. You can only be part of the matter of what the heart and the soul without personal opinion. Just what is the way of spirit. The seventh gate, her gown. This is her final payment to the guardians. What could be the symbol of clue for those who do ritual in skyclad? Once you remove the cover of yourself, you can join within the community of spirits and experience the whole of spirituality. For a gown is of self expression. Without it, you are naked to the spirit. There are no barriers between you and a spiritual existence. As we move within our mundane lives and do ritual in our spiritual lives, we really need to strip ourselves of our opinions and societies and views of us in order to see what the heart and soul purely is telling us.
Mm.
Allowing spirit to take over without consciousness, especially for those doing ritual work, this you will find very helpful. Doing this within our own lives, we find our path again with new light and a new look, a new understanding and balance of what we could see before and what we believe to be true. Some may see a new road of enlightenment, others see this same enlightenment with view, with a view. Okay, the necklace, we all wear necklaces. You know, I've had this one for years. And do I wear it during ritual? Yes. I do not have to take the road to the underworld as a priestess would. Okay. So usually I keep this on. Now I've seen a lot of people within covens do the descent of the goddess, and they truly symbolically go through it. We have done it within the coven of the Blessed Lady. And kudos for those women who do that. It does show personal power. It's just like for me, this is the third initial pinnacle. Does it represent power to those who recognize it? Yes. Is it important? To me, it's important. Not a day doesn't go by that this neck. I'm surprised the silver hasn't really worn off it, because a lot of times I'll pick it up and I'll
Mm.
just twiddle it between my fingers. I rub it. I'm surprised I haven't rubbed the silver through it.
So
But
that's present. I eat plated silver.
who what?
My skin eats plated silver. I'll eventually wear through it on its own.
I do that with rings. If I have a silver ring, it just wears out after about 2 or 3 years.
Hmm.
It's just one of those things. To me, when we wear these necklaces, it does deal with the descent in a
Hmm.
way. We all walk through that realm of these seven gates. We come into this world naked. We leave this world, the spiritual plane, the same way that we came in.
Hmm.
Basically, we do. And it's important for us to recognize that we we cannot take these things with us. They can be
Hmm.
buried with us, they can be cremated with us, but the true value of it is what's in our heart.
Yep.
Our ring, okay, it's very important because to me, my my pinnacle ring is magical.
Hmm.
I use it for magic. Not as being elder, I don't usually use it that much as I did because I'm watching my magic manifest
Hmm.
throughout all these years. You know, that ring has served me well. I've had it a good 25 years, maybe longer. I bought that in Iowa City back in 99,
Hmm.
2000. So it has been with me. But it's going to go with me. No, it it is to be passed on when I die. Same way with my third degree pinnacle. You know, it's going to be given to somebody who is worthy.
Hmm. That's a good topic, actually. Is like when we do pass on, do you have a plan for um, your ritual supplies, your tools? Like, where does that go? Because that's a fear for a lot of practitioners. Like, do you set up, like, have you set up a plan on where your things go? Um, I have, but I had earlier this year that close call period, and it really changed how I looked at things. And so I sat down and made those hard decisions of like medically what happens when and things like that. And then it's like,
Yeah,
okay, well, if something happens to me, like who gets my witchcraft stuff? Because my partner, while religiously pagan, is not a practicing witch. And it's like I'm sure that there's things that he would want to keep for sentimental value
yeah.
and to put me up on the ancestor altar on. But a lot of it has no use to him. And so I started going through people in the coven and students and like, okay, like these are things that are going to go places. And then
I,
the rest of it can be distributed however, but like I picked out pieces that will go to certain people.
I want all my magical things to go to my family.
Hmm.
That's to me that's where the we are laying the the foundations of magic
Hmm.
within our
Well,
future.
maintaining the like generational practices. That's
Yeah,
happened in my husband's side too. When my grandmother-in-law passed, she was also a practitioner, and she had some specific pieces that were meant to go to different family members, and I was really surprised to find out that I was included in this because I married into the family,
yeah,
and I received one of her wands, her scrying orb, and then those big storage totes, like
yeah.
with the lids on the top of them. I was given one of those full of rough stones and fossils, seashells, things like that, and then a few books. but I was just so like heartbroken with grief that like she chose me to be one of the people to carry on her legacy.
No, that's actually a blessing. You should.
I mean, it is a blessing, but it's like sad that, well, like I love the fact that, well, I guess I should rephrase that. I am honored that uh, she included me as such a member of the family that I was included in that,
Well, I think that's
but
beautiful.
sad at the loss.
Yeah, yeah. But we have to remember, this is really hard for people
Mm,
that, like, when death happens, it is hard to take at the moment, at the time.
mm,
But we have to remember that our loved ones are always in our heart,
mhm,
is always within our flesh and blood, our bone, that we are a product of millennia. We have been around for millennia, millennia, millennia
mhm,
through the female line, because the magic of females is that the eggs are passed on from female to female
mhm.
to female. And that's where we get our heritage from,
Well,
if you really think about it.
when we talk about death, the three pieces of advice that I like to give people is as somebody who I hate using the term psychic, but as somebody who sees spirits, they visit people. Whether you call it heaven, the underworld, whatever version of afterlife you want to subscribe to, it has visiting hours. They come and check up on you. They watch,
Yeah.
uh, and they're never truly gone. But also, my favorite bit of necromancy is storytelling. That they live on in the stories that we tell of them. So when you miss somebody, share a story about them.
Yes.
Because
I
even
agree
for
with
just a
that.
moment, their memory comes back to life. And that's one of the most powerful and my favorite magics.
Okay, let's see here. We we need to talk about our scepter, you know,
Mm,
in our crown. Very important, because for me, my scepter, which is actually my wand, that is a very influential. Hello, Witch Master, is very important. So is my crown. I do wear a crown during ritual in most cases. That is also, for me, it is about authority. Inside the circle, it is about authority. Whereas a high priestess, she rules in and out of the circle. And the only time I will disobey a high priestess is one, if she is truly out of my tradition, and I think she's full of BS. But I will always be respectful. You know, and we should look at the people who have earned these, who have truly earned these with respect and admiration, because they have worked so hard for these things. It means royal blood in most cases. And to me, for a person to go through all three initiations, plus their dedication, and they have devoted their life, you know, that's really important. But for the goddess to surrender these as she's going through the seven gates, um, yeah, it is sacrifice. And I have watched priestesses do this, and and I admire that. Okay, we did talk about the necklace, which represents personal power. We talked about that. The ring, okay, we wear rings. And, I wear a magical ring. I have a marriage ring, but since I only have one hand, I don't wear one. I used to put it around my neck, but I found that wearing it around my neck, all my other necklaces got kind of twisted up, so I quit wearing it. I don't need to. I'm old, so I truly don't worry about females knowing, hey, are you married or are you not? To me, it doesn't matter. But I do occasionally wear my magical ring. Um, the fifth one is the girdle. As we said before, the girdle represents the appearance we give each other. And a lot of times women wear girdles for what? To pull their belly in, to make them look more sexier, prettier, beautiful, whatever. You know, it, and a lot of times I call it false advertisement.
There is spiritual girdles, though. There are
Yes,
quite a few traditions that use a girdle or a thigh strap or a witch's ladder on the thigh specifically for ritual garb. And yeah, it's a thing. You don't see it under the robes. You might not know about it, but it's there in some
yeah.
places.
Okay. This is also very symbolic about um, realizing our imperfections, that we're not perfect. We should recognize that all of us is flawed within the path.
Mhm.
But when we pass through this gate, we should also realize that we are a being of perfection. The mundane world, we may not be perfect. We do have our imperfections. We may not be the thinnest, we may not be the most beautiful to men or women. There is a flaw there. But spiritually, when we surrender this, going through this gate, we become that perfect spiritual being. Because all of these need to be taken with spirituality and how we view each one of these gates. Sixth gate, her sandals. This has to do with our spiritual path and how we follow our path. We cannot cling to our politics here. Politics should not enter into our religious beliefs, no matter what our spiritual path is. You know, it's like the modern day National Christian Association. I realize that they're trying to do the right thing, but I also realize that we shouldn't have politics within our spiritual path.
Mhm.
Yes, Witchmaster, you are correct. Radical political activism is not witchcraft
No,
to me.
no.
It
I
just,
may go to in support of a protest and be performing witchcraft in the background for protection or peace or things like that. But that is me using my religious function for the betterment of the event, not me going and hexing the patriarchy. I'm trying to keep people safe. I'm not going farther than that. Start local.
yeah. Yeah. We have to keep a separation.
Hmm.
We have to keep that separate. Our politics has no reason within our craft. Our path, for me, um, I've always said that witchcraft is a thorny path because we learn many lessons. And going without our shoes, our sandals, is part of that path. Every once in a while, we do have to step upon a burr, a
Hmm.
thistle, to wake us up spiritually. Wow, I saw a cat.
Hmm. Okay.
And we should walk this path without deviation. We should always be true north to who we are spiritually. We don't have to agree with what everybody says
Hmm.
about, you know, I've had people come up to me, where did you read this at? Where did you read this at? Where did you get this information? Well, if you pay attention to those who are around you, sometimes the goddess speaks through people and you learn things. But also, if you go into circle like you should, you will learn many things from the goddess.
Hmm.
Another thing about walking the path is that we should, I wouldn't say walk blindly with faith, because we should never walk blindly with faith. We should have faith within ourselves, but don't walk blindly to somebody else's drum beat of what faith is. You know, don't be that horse, with blinders up. Don't be that mule. Don't be that dog that chases its tail. Do not walk with blind faith. Walk with your faith, with your truth when you go through this gate. Understand what you are stepping into. Understand what faith is. Learn about faith. Learn about spirituality and how to separate the mundane life, whether it's political or family problems within the hierarchy. Understand how to separate it between your spiritual self and your rituals. Get centered, grounded, then do your rituals. You know, there is so much that the goddess has given us, and a lot of times we don't realize it. But for each of us, the descent of the goddess is going to mean different things. It's like I said before, the ultimate divine, spiritual, mental, astral, elemental, and physical. You know, all of these things that we're talking about has the bare soul of consciousness. And it's when we realize what each of these things mean to us that we realize how important they are to us
Hmm.
spiritually. We should keep all of these things spiritually. Yes, we must honor the goddess over all political BS. I
Hmm.
agree with you.
My view on it is that when you enter that ritual circle, you are stepping outside of the world, and that you need to leave all worldly issues on the outside of that circle.
Yes, yes. Yeah, to give up your, like, for the goddess to give up her sandals is to asking you to let all your personal views no longer exist. No politics, self direction, or any other personal agenda. Once you're stripped of this, you can only walk with spirit. And I agree with what is written in front of me because you're no longer engaged within the physical presence or existence. You can only then be the matters of what is in the heart and the soul without personal opinion, just as the way of spirit. I agree with this. It's been part of our well, it was part of my learning early on. The descent of the goddess is very important, but it's also something that has really happened. And we should really look at this. Okay, when we understand about the gown, this is her final, payment to the guardians. For those of us who do ritual and skyclad, it means a lot because we are stripped away. It becomes more of important of stripping away our uh, inhibitants within.
Hmm.
It's like I said before, we come into this world naked, we are going out naked in most cases. It is about stepping forward in your true self shining through. It is our spirit and our higher self that is making a connection with the divine, as above, so below. And in this case, the goddess did it. She suffered humility. Okay, I need to get back into this. But it's also a way for us to be within our self expression of who we truly are.
Hmm.
This is a time where we should actually look deep down. Does our looks really matter? Hence, we have self consciousness
Hmm.
that inhibits our behavior within the ritual circle. But also, there's those of us when we view the ritual robe being on, the gown, that it inhibits and puts up a barrier of magical energy.
Hmm.
Us feeling that magical energy is this important. I think it's more of a mind thought.
Agree. It's
It's what we how we portray it, how we accept the magic coming to us.
mm,
I've
it's
been
part of
in
the magical
rituals
theater.
where I've worn my blue jeans, tennis shoes, and I've had a very powerful magical experience.
Hmm.
I'm sure that there are others that have had that,
Hmm.
but there are also those of us, and I'm not, taking anything from either side. I don't believe in doing that. That they believe that skyclad is very important, but I think it's all in the way that we are taught. But also, it's important for us to realize that magic is an acceptance.
Hmm.
Mentally, it is an acceptance. And we should know that, magic comes to us in various different ways.
Hmm.
You know,
And I
we,
think all three are correct. Like sometimes I do private ritual skyclads. Sometimes, I'm in my house clothes, or we're at a public ritual and I'm in a t-shirt and jeans. And sometimes we're at private ritual and it's full ceremonial garb.
for me,
But they're
it's
all magical.
for
I'm
me
the magic.
for me to do skyclad, I have to be comfortable
Yeah.
with those who I'm around.
Hmm. I generally do it privately, so it's either like me and my husband, or like some very close friends. But we're not just gonna go out camping in the middle of the nowhere with a bunch of strangers and be skyclad. Like, I have
Yeah.
some dignity.
Well, I've been to rituals that has been like that, where the public's invited, but hey, don't bring your kids. Do
Yeah,
not do this with your kids.
no.
Okay, I stress that because if you do it, you're going to get caught eventually, and you're going to go to jail for a very long time.
Hmm.
So
That there's
words
an
and wise.
appropriate time and
Yeah,
ritual to take your children to, and a skyclad ritual is not that. Mm-mm. That is an 18 plus event.
yes, yes. Well, I would say for those who are mature enough above 18,
Yeah.
because I've seen people come into these rituals who are in for it for the sex.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, there are traditions that ab do have the great rite and things like that, where that may be a thing. And I would heavily encourage you to ask a lot of questions and um, make informed decisions if you want to join that particular style. Be informed.
Yes, yes. Be very informed. Ask questions. If
Yep.
you're invited to one of these, you know, be informed.
I'm not gonna
So
say that they're right or wrong. It I
I
that
think it's
that's
up to
not
the
my
morals.
practice.
It's up to the morals of the
Yeah. Hmm.
individual person. I have no problems with people having sex. It ain't like I haven't seen it before because I've been in the pagan community long enough to know that, Beltane brings out the beast in all of us.
Mm,
You know, to me, going without your ritual robe is a conscious thing. It is
hmm.
liberating to your spirit as long as you don't let it become inhibiting.
Yep.
And also, a lot of this also deals with if you look at during the burning times, we did sky-clad rituals to flush out the Christians.
Hmm. Yeah.
You
That
know,
but that was a time that nudity was considered a grievous offense, and we
yes,
even have record of that in how they removed spirits during Victorian time. If
yeah,
you walked around your home naked, it was said to scare away the ghosts because they were so pious and reserved that they would flee at the presence of somebody's nudity.
it's kind of hard to believe, but
At the
yeah,
time, I could see it because like undergarments were worn like all the time, and they had split-legged garments, but like seeing somebody in like a full state of undress that you were not married to was a absolute rarity.
yeah, yeah, I can somewhat see it. I can, but I can't because I know that these people who think that they are pious, especially back in the old days, those dirty little hurdy-gurdies. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
wait, the preacher's child
Yeah,
conundrum.
yeah,
Like
you
that,
know,
there's some of that for sure, but like the general social standing was that like um, nudity was not a very public thing. But we also see that in like Welsh folklore with witches, that if you were to curse somebody of a higher status, a woman would expose her chest, and she would be screaming profanities and curses at the man. And this was considered one of the most powerful curses you could do because it was a woman of lower class bringing ruin upon somebody above her that she could not target otherwise.
yeah.
It was feared.
But a lot of people, they have that inhibiting
Yeah.
upon them because they view, well, I'm heavy set, or for men, they're heavy set or maybe not well endowed.
Who
You know,
cares?
the rituals are not about that. It's
Well,
about
your
liberating
ancestors.
yourself and stepping into a spiritual
Mhm.
uh, awakening.
Our
We
our
should be
ancestors
awakening.
didn't survive famine for you not to live in abundance. Our like everybody's body's going to be different. People are going to have stretch marks, and at least for my tradition, stretch marks are a kiss from Thor. It is a blessing that you have experienced such abundance that your skin changes. And it's fine if you have rolls or cellulite or whatever. Look at the Venetian goddess statues.
Yeah,
Those are some curvy goddesses. And even for the men out there, if you have a beer gut, who cares? If you're worried about the sizing downstairs, who cares? You will find somebody. Like, not everybody wants an Ezekiel 2023. Like, if you get the reference, you get the reference.
yeah. You know, it's very important for us to. I would recommend for everybody to try a sky clad ritual.
Mm,
You know, if it's with you and your husband, if you're lucky enough to have a husband or a wife to do rituals with you,
mm.
do it.
I
You
also
don't have
recommend.
to, like for me and Chris, we've had our kids around for years and years and years. You know, I never did sky clad rituals with them. I
Mm,
never would. But that doesn't mean that I haven't gone to Gardanian circles and
mm,
haven't done sky clad rituals,
mm.
or going to a public ritual,
Clothing optional camp type
clothing,
rituals. Hmm.
clothing optional. Does I don't let it bug me because for me myself, I find it very liberating.
Hmm.
My spiritual self can open up with comfort
Mm.
and
Because I've done that too.
and
Um,
actually tune into the magical
mhm.
energies. And I think a lot of us should do that because
Yeah.
it is a road of new enlightenment. We should let ourselves become enlightened.
Mm,
I'm not saying that it's right for everybody.
yeah. Well, I think that
For me,
if you
when I was younger, it was very enlightening.
mhm.
Now
If you
that I'm
find it
old,
uncomfortable, try it. Like, um, being uncomfortable is causing change, and you can even do it by yourself. One of my favorite rituals is a self-love ritual that goes on for about a week, and you sit sky-clad in front of a mirror, and you start listing off things that you like about yourself, and it's very, very hard. I cannot stress enough that it is very hard to find things you genuinely love about yourself. But by the end of the week, or if you take it to a month, you will genuinely start to love things about yourself.
yeah, it's like for me, when I first stepped into the path, you know, I was very conscious about me being handicapped when I first
Mm,
lost my hand. And I'm going through all these initiations. I'd look in the mirror, I'd be repulsed because I used to be that guy who could bench press 420 pounds. I was built, like no other. I was a combat engineer, and I kind of lost all that.
mhm.
I lost a lot of freedom, so things that I enjoyed. But what I found out was through the sacrifice of those things, when I look at the descent of the goddess, I also see what the goddess has sacrificed through us. She
Mhm.
sacrificed her humility, anything that related to who she was and her power.
Yeah, she sacrificed her down to a consciousness.
Yes, sacrifice down to a spiritual being. Okay, that takes a lot
Mhm.
because she is a, a crownship. She is a queen in her own right
Mhm.
upon creation. And when she's given up all these tokens of who she is, it humbles.
Mhm. Well, those are some of my favorite myths of the gods in general. Especially like in the northern traditions, the all of the gods experience a sacrifice of some sort. Like Odin hung from the tree, and his eye, Tyr his hand. Um, Freya sacrificed her marriage for power. Um, just and things like the Morrigan, where if I remember right, she sacrificed a child, and not she gave away her child, I should say, and that was the sacrifice that she endured. Um, but there we see that in a lot of uh, different pantheons, and they're testaments to what is the price of magic,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that
look at Persephone. She was kidnapped, taken into
yeah,
the underworld against her will.
hmm
Demeter, her mother, was frantic looking for her.
try to reclaim her,
Because
and
Demeter realized how important that Persephone was to the world.
hmm
She realized that all
yep,
living things must have her back. But also, we have to take in hindsight, that a child was born out of this, a child of light,
hmm
to be reborn upon the face of the earth.
hmm
You know, Hecate, being the torchbearer, the light giver, you
hmm
know, she went into the darkness. And it's through Hecate that we find our own truths and our own shadows.
yeah, she's
But
the one
she
that
lights
repeatedly,
those flaws within us. She lights
hmm
them up so that we could see when we are going through our initiations,
hmm
we see exactly who we are.
yep,
And if she doesn't cast it, another witch will cast it at you, whether
hmm
they realize it or not. It's like for me, when I was going through my first and second initiations, I had so much anger within me that I had to go through all of these things to become the person that I am today. I had to give up being a soldier. I was incapable of being a soldier anymore, physically. That was hard for me to grasp. Hecate lit the way. But Persephone showed me, through going through the seven gates, it's okay. It's okay to
hmm
be young and to grow old. And that's exactly what she's shown us here. That we are going through our stages of life. And sometimes we don't realize it until we get older.
yep,
You know, these seven gates, we all descend through.
hmm
Even here on earth, as a living being, sometimes we have to sacrifice. You know,
well, and even metaphorically, those account for the seven realms.
yeah, yeah.
And
The
so like we're constantly
seven
shifting through
influences.
those as witches.
Yeah, and we should strive to realize that we should be humble,
hmm
even before first initiates. We should be humble. And I tell everybody who comes into the coven, our coven stead, that the young priestess person initiate who is coming through the ranks will someday I will have to bow before.
hmm
So I will treat them with respect. because I know in the bottom of my heart, if they are true to who they are, they will someday wear a crown. And I have to respect that.
Hmm.
Nature does not break down social norms. Only men do this. Nature does not have to because it's nature of self evidence. Yeah, I can agree with that.
Hmm.
We have to, when we're looking at the sin of the goddess, it is something that has happened and it is repeated time and time again.
Hmm.
And we should also realize that, that it is something that is still ongoing. Just because it has happened once in myth, I hate to tell people this, but it is still happening and is still relevant. These are not stories to go, oh, this is really nice. Nice story, nice, ritual that you've included this in. But it is our way to celebrate the wheel of the year, to know that, this is going to happen. It's going to repeat itself. And without this repeat cycle, of awareness of death, rebirth, we would not have life. You know, it is very evident within the myths of Lake Nimai, of the crow who dove deep into the earth, I mean, into the lake, and came back out. And
Hmm.
it was black and white. There is a truth to all these things. You know, why did Hades love Persephone so much? Why did he kidnap her? Well, these are things that people are going to have to figure out for themselves. It's like the raven. Why does the raven play an important part within a witch's life? Well, I ain't going to answer that because I want people to seek out their truth
Hmm.
of this truth. And it should be very important for everybody to realize, what does Hecate have to do with this? What does Hades have to do with this? What does Persephone have to do with this? But better yet, we could spin it around Tiana too,
Hmm. Diana
because
and Tanis
it,
and the Shadowed One, or Inanna, or the Descent of Balder. This is a
you could
story
look at
that.
it as Diana and Lucifer. You could look at
Mhm.
it with Diana and Dionysus. You could look at Dionysus.
Mhm.
I can't remember the counterpart to that. But all these things are important, and we should dwell deep within our studies to figure out what is truth, what is your spiritual truth.
Dionysus descended to retrieve his mother's Semel.
Okay,
I had to look that one up. I couldn't remember it.
but but also I've been taught that you know that Lucifer is actually Dionysus.
Hmm. There's aspects there, yeah.
Yeah,
There's um,
there's
there's
aspects to it all.
mhm. There's a lot of crossover when we start looking at deities as archetypes and kind of how they overlay one another. When you get into like comparative religion, it gets really fascinating.
Yes, yes. You can find this within the Enochian teachings. If you want to
Hmm.
chase that, that is a lot to deal with Iana or even Sophia, dealing with the
Hmm.
first Adam. The first Adam was not made of clay, he was a spiritual being. There was a second Adam, there was a third Adam, you know. And people don't realize this. They take what is written in front of them and they take it as truth. Whereas this is what I've learned through the years. Do not take anything that is written, what is written. Don't take it as verbatim.
Yeah, question everything. Question your teachers, your mentors, source materials, because unfortunately with some source materials, the context for some of it's been lost to time or colonization, and we're kind of left to fill in the blanks. And that's not a bad thing. We're in living traditions.
Yes, magic is living and breathing. It's like I hear a lot of people say, well, witchcraft is in reclamation or reclaiming the craft. What I think that we're doing is that our spirits are remembering magic and bringing it forth to a time that it is much needed.
Mm,
I think this is a time that it is very needed,
hmm
for us to start practicing. It's like for me, I may not be the most brilliant of witches. I'm not, but I am very spiritual within the craft. And I see it more as a religious aspect. I recognize Thomas. I recognize Diana. I recognize Lucifer. You know, I see all these gods.
hmm
Are they real? Well, the only way for a person to really know is to take the challenge. What I call the challenge, the great hunt. Be part of that great hunt. You know, experience it, feel it, call it forth. Hear the God is speaking to you.
I
You know,
agree.
it's the only way.
hmm And
I
I've met a ton of pagans or like people that practice witchcraft that view deities and these spirits as different things, but none of them argue the effect.
yeah,
It's an argument over semantics on like what this spirit is.
the spirit is what spirit is.
hmm Then
How
there's
how do we how do we recognize it? I've gone through years and years. I sit there. I confess that I recognize all these gods and goddesses, and I recognize God and goddess. But I always, when I go into the circle, unless the high priestess tells me, I will always say God. I will always say goddess because the line is blurred for me. Me, not maybe not for you, maybe not for, like Witchmaster. It is a blurred line for me because I see them all. I recognize them all. I feel them all.
and I agree
So,
with you. I can't To disprove one deity for me is to disprove them all. And so I very much I wouldn't necessarily claim to be an omnist, but I cannot disprove somebody else's deities or spirits without also disproving mine.
well, it's like you know, I have, I'll have a student and he'll start talking about God, and I will look at a neophyte. I will look at him and say, prove God is real to me. Prove that he is real. And that's where, I want him to put proof to the pudding. You know, I want to see that custard. You know, is it baked? Is it done? Is it true? Is it real? And they fail by not showing me. But do they really fail? No, it's because of their ignorance. When we look at each one another, there is God. Whether it's man, woman, child, or any being that walks across the face of the earth, whether it's plant, insect, there is Goddess, there is God. Show me magic. Go outside, stand in the wind. There is magic. Go outside during the night, watch the moon go across the sky. That is magic.
And people hate when I ask that because or when I answer that, I should say, is because my answer is magic is that re-embracing that childlike wonder that you once had and putting on those rose-colored glasses and experiencing the joy and whimsy in life. It's the laughter of a child blowing a dandelion into the wind, feeling the sun on your skin, the rustle of leaves. It's slowing down and embracing the world and reinserting yourself as a part of nature and not above it.
Yeah, yeah. You know, a lot of witches get upset at me because I use Christ as a reference, but it's a way for me to make it so that our Christian brothers and sisters who see this, they realize that Christ taught these very exact same things, these exact things that we are talking about right now, just in a different way. And I say, well, why do you say that? Well, he was indoctrinated by Egyptian magic. You know, he just didn't disappear off the face of the earth. You know, from the time he was a baby. You know, he went out and saw the world. He experienced the world. He encountered different cultures, and he knew of these things. You know, because I bared witness to the exact same things that he did. You know, I watched us in a circle one night on the night of my first initiation, going to a hospital because somebody got sick within our wedding party. You know, an aneurysm. He died. We prayed. We embraced the magic. He came back to life. And guess what? A nurse came in from from where he was at to where we was at and said, I don't know what you guys are doing, but he's back to life. He stayed alive long enough for his parents and his loved ones to come to Vermont and to be with them during his last final hours. You know, I have seen many great things. I've seen people, you know, come begging to me to help them with their child because their child is going to have to go through a surgery. They have a hole in their heart that is about the size of your pinky. Now, for a baby, that is serious. We cast a spell. Guess what? They go in to fix the problem, and there's no problem. It has been healed. So, you know, my first initiation, right after the first full moon, is when I really realized that God was real, that He was real and is real. He is very relevant. Why? Because I draw down the moon. I saw the circle come to life. I saw the elementals. The ancient ones were with me. God was real. Goddess was real. I embraced magic from that time on, but not in the realization that most people, for me, I lusted after it. I chased it. I studied. I didn't take people's words as truth. I looked at everybody as a liar. And I chased the truth from what they said or from what the goddess taught me. You know, nobody showed me how to cast a circle. I did it naturally. So, you know, to me, it's very important for us to be purpose, what am I trying to say? To find the perfect way for them to make that connection with the God and Goddess. Not only chasing what is old and written, but to find their truth within their magical path. A great instance for me was when I came across the Cabots. They helped me out before I became initiated. When I went out there, I was angry. Uh, Lori Cabot's his high priest, her high priest at that time, and I didn't realize who he was. So I was looking through all these crystals, and he walked up to me and goes, "This is what you need." So I bought it, I put it on, that crystal turned black. It was taking all that negativity out of me. And I didn't realize it at that time, but that crystal was healing me. And was that magic? Yes, because it turned black. My attitude changed. Instead of being angry, I became more humble within my life. Instead of thinking that the world owed me, I realized that I owed it. Does magic change people? Yes, it does. If you're true and humble within finding your path, your spiritual path, and it doesn't matter what path you follow, you will become humble. Ah, which match master says it's all magic. At the end of the day, Chris, but Jesus is a political figure also. Is he? It's only political to the people who make him political. The Christ that I know is humble. And he said, "Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's." That is the way that we should approach it as witches. Because we too can use the goddess as a political shield very easily, but we don't because we know better. Because she will put you in your place. If the Christians want to use him as a political figure, they can. But it's not the truth, truly not his way, because I never saw him speak of politics.
He was political in a way. He did oppose the Romans.
Just as
And
we oppose today's political society within,
mhm, he
within the
was free radical, but
world.
he becomes a complicated figure. But there's a lot of mythos that have these political charged figures during times of rebellion and things like that in reform. Like it's a common trope.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Because we see that with Aradia as well.
But he's no different than us. Aradia was very anti establishment as
Hmm.
far as the Catholic Church, you know, and I don't blame her, because look at the way the world was, at that point in time, you know, they wanted to take everything from you. It's no different than today's political scheme, If it ain't the church wanting all your money, then it turns around and guess what? You know who wants it all? The rich man. If you're not rich, as far as pocket money, yeah. And I still stand by, my belief. Let the lawmakers take everything away from us. We will still be rich in spirit. And that to me is important. That is what's really important. We have to stand by our guns and be humble because they are truly not our boss. They are not a god. So anybody who's in politics, excuse me for saying this, but they can kiss my butt. And any of those who use Christ in the wrong way, they can kiss my butt too, because it ain't truth. You know, Christ did not preach war. He preached peace. He taught about taking care of the poor. The goddess teaches that. Aradia taught us that. You know, we need to look at truth and let it be at the truth. And for those who use gods as political means, well, they're going to get it in the end. If not in this life, the next. I'm sorry, I always promised that I would not get into the politics while we're on air, but I just don't believe in it. There has to be a separation.
There's a separation of quote unquote church and state. Yep.
Yeah, not because it's law, it's because that's what Aradia has taught me.
Uh-huh.
You know, keep it to a truth.
Uh-huh.
Don't let gods become countercultural, political. We can't be bigots. In our beliefs. I agree with you, Witchmaster. But what Christ was trying to teach us was to break the barriers of our inhibition and realize how great our spirit was within us, that we are creators. And the goddess teaches us that too. He was very into the, the feminine realization of goddess. He realized Sophia. And he did, in a way, break Jewish law because he preached against it. Because he taught us that forgiveness comes from within. That the moment that we sin or we failed God, that forgiveness was already there. It's the same way with our gods. Our gods know when we're going to do wrong. And they've already forgiven us, but sometimes we have to be punished within this life. It's very important for us to remember that we're not going to see the same light within each other's god and goddesses. It's when we strip away the lies, because we can't go by what the New Testament wrote. That is BS, total BS. If we really want to understand Christ, of who he was, we're going to have to go back to the pagan roots of what Christianity was. Where
There's
did
actually a really good book on that called Jesus Through the Pagan Eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I recommend that. It's really good for deconstruction too.
Well, if you really want to get into it, we need to look at the Enochian teachings, where they get into speaking about Sophia and Adam, and Eve, and see the truth. Why we don't remember what our past lives was. Why don't we remember? Because we drank from the pool of forgetfulness. You know, is that even mentioned within the Old Testament or the New Testament? No. Why is it wrong for us to love the same sex? Is that a truth? I don't think so. Because Christ didn't say nothing about that. Neither did the goddess say anything against it. So, to me, there's a lot of inaccuracies. Why should I believe a book that was written 300 years later? You know, when I could sit there with my own studies and find out these truths. And that's why I stand, the way I do with my guns with Christ, because if you're going by what the New Testament says, to me, that is a big bunch of lies. We have to look at whether Christ was real. I don't know if he was real. I don't.
Well,
But I
then, if he
will,
is real, which one of the five recorded that we have the quote unquote historical evidence of is the one that they wrote about?
yeah. Well, I guess some documents came up of Pontius Pilate where he spoke of Jesus. He died on the cross. Is that the same Jesus that died on the cross for mankind's sin? We don't know,
Mhm.
because there was a lot of people who was named Jesus. And if you really look at the name Jesus, it actually means Hail Zeus. Okay.
Well, his original name is what was it? It was Yeshua, and then transliterated through Greek into English, it became Jesus. But
Yeah.
there's still five recorded in the area during the supposed time frame, and one of them was a necromancer. He was tried by a rabbi for performing necromancy.
Yeah. But Christ didn't do nothing no different than a modern day witch does. If you really look at it. The right polarity. The right polarity. Mary Magdalene. She was the phenomenon to Jesus' masculinity. You know, Everything is dual. And I agree with that.
Mhm.
Having two sides or poles. Jesus is on one side and the Pharisees on the other. The Pharisees were dumb at. They were not smart. Um, if I was going to look at the opposite polarity of Christ, it would be Mary Magdalene. And for a person to know who she was indoctrinated with, uh, what was being taught magically back in those days. She was a priestess in her own right. I'm sorry, everybody. I don't mean to go on and, speak about Christ. You know, I'm not about defending him, but I want people to know that I
Well,
don't
we view him more from a Gnostic approach than we do from a Christianized approach.
I don't believe in the New Testament. I'm not saying that Christ didn't exist, but the Christ that I know was not one apolitical. He was against politics, being within the spirituality. And I think how modern man has weaponized Christ is totally wrong. He, it would be like me bringing the goddess into our modern day politics and using her against Christianity. That would be wrong. Everybody has to choose their own path, what is right and wrong. It's where we see it psychologically and what power that we will let it have over us. For me, I prefer not to let these things have power on me, over me. I prefer to try to carry a balance and see Christ for who he is. If he is God manifest as a man, he is no different than what Hercules was. And we should also take it in kinship with Aradia. Aradia is very important, spiritually. If we look at it, Christ's mother was also born of a virgin birth, and her mother before her was born of a virgin birth, which for some reason I don't know why that's not written within the New Testament. You know, who are these people? Are they real or are they not? You know, it's like I tell people, don't take things that is uh, uh, written down as lit. Test it out spiritually. You know, we're not, we shouldn't be like mules that are put on a grind wheel and we walk in circles. You know, people have died because of these conversations. How many people has died in Christ's name? You know, we've
I'm
done a
sure
lot.
there's a statistic too for that. But that's probably a good place to wrap up, don't you think? We've been on for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, we need to end this, but you know, I'm not trying to get everybody stirred up, but we should really look at the truth of what spirituality is and the descent of the goddess. There's a lot of revealing information. Why is the descent of the goddess so important? You know, how did the goddess end up in the underworld? Yes, it is a very good talk. In which, Master, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't mean to offend anybody. You know, I'm not defending Christ, but you know, I look at the good things of what has been written about him,
Well, and our
whether it's
practices
real or
are
not. You know,
a
I want people
culmination.
to realize that. You know, we should really take a good cue from Christ and pull out what is good, and the rest of it, you know, is like all of us in our learnings in the craft.
Yeah.
We appeal to that which we like, and what we don't, we shun it.
hmm
You know?
Well, it's about life experience too. If somebody comes from a Christian background, as a lot of us do, like there's nothing wrong with taking the good teachings and moralities and bringing that in with you to a practice, because ultimately your lived experience will influence your practice.
Yes, yes. Do I bring Christianity into my spiritual path? No, but I do live my life according to a moral
hmm
standard, which I think we all should do.
hmm
Aradia taught that. You know, the goddess teaches that. You know, through the charge of the goddess. You know, there are tenets of Aradia which I live by.
hmm
But you know, we have to take everything with a grain of salt.
hmm
You know, it's my challenge to everybody who studies the path.
Yeah,
Proof,
ultimately.
put proof to the pudding. Don't take
hmm
everything as real. Just because it's written down in a book doesn't make it real.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this Kabbalah said to me years ago when I first started following the path at a what would say a continuous rate of acceleration. Look at everything as a lie and keep it as a lie until you prove it truth. Find your truth. And this is his exact words of find your truth, whether it be through Christ or through the goddess. Your ascent, your transcendence is upon what you prove in this life and you see as true, whether it's mundane or spiritual. Stick to the truth. And with that, hey, love and light, everybody. Thank you, Nicho,
Yeah, thank you.
Master.
Blessings, everybody.
Have a beautiful evening or a beautiful day whenever you watch this. And thank you so much. Like and subscribe. And love and light. Thank
Blessings,
you.
y'all.